Hello and welcome. The image of the medieval blacksmith is one of fire and strength, of a man forging a shining sword for a noble knight. But the reality of his daily life was a quieter, more humble, and far more essential craft. This is the story not of a weapon maker for kings, but of the man who held the entire village together, one nail and one repaired tool at a time. Before we begin our journey into his world, if you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, find your most comfortable position, and let's discover the reality behind the legend of the forge. Our story begins in the year of our Lord 1320, in the deep, quiet darkness that comes an hour before the dawn. In a small English village, nestled beside a slow-moving river, the world is asleep. The only sounds are the distant call of an owl and the soft rustle of the wind in the thatched roofs of the small timber-framed houses. But in one of these houses, a man is already stirring. Your name is Owen, and you are the village blacksmith. Your day does not begin with the sun, it begins with the fire. You rise from your simple straw mattress, the air in your small one-room cottage cold enough to see your breath. Your wife and children are still asleep, quiet mounds under woolen blankets. You move with a practiced silence, pulling on a coarse linen shirt and heavy leather trousers. You do not stop to eat. The first meal of the day must be earned by the first sweat of your brow. Your home is attached to your workshop, and you pass through a heavy wooden door into the heart of your world, the smithy. The forge is a dark, cavernous space, its single, large opening shuttered against the night. The air inside is cold, and it carries the unique and ancient smells of your trade. It is the smell of cold, metallic iron, of old, burnt charcoal, of soot, and of the faint, sharp scent of horsehoof from the previous day's shoeing. Your first task is to wake the fire, the great hungry beast that is the soul of your craft. In the center of the room is the forge itself, a large raised hearth of stone and clay, with a deep bowl-like depression in the center. At the bottom of this depression, buried under a thick blanket of gray ash, is the heart of yesterday's fire. With a small iron shovel, you carefully begin to clear away the ash. A faint residual warmth rises to meet you. Deep within the ash you find them, a few precious glowing embers, a faint pulsing red in the darkness. They have survived the night. You do not have to start a fire from scratch, a small but significant blessing. You gently place the embers onto a bed of dry, stringy tinder, and then you begin to work the bellows. The great twin-chambered leather bellows are as large as a small cow, and they are the lungs of the forge. You pull down on the long wooden handle, the leather creaks, and the first chamber collapses, letting out a long, soft, sighing breath of air through a clay nozzle. The tuyere aimed at the heart of the embers. As you lift the handle, the first chamber refills, while the second one exhales. Whoosh, dot, 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 whoosh, dot, dot, dot. Whoosh, the sound is a slow, rhythmic, mechanical breath in the quiet of the morning. For a few minutes, nothing seems to happen, but you are patient. You watch the embers. The faint red glow begins to brighten, to turn a more vibrant orange. A tiny, hesitant wisp of smoke curls upwards. You add a few small pieces of dry kindling and continue your slow, steady rhythm on the bellows. The kindling catches, a small, clean flame flickering to life. Now you begin to add the fuel. It is not wood but charcoal, prepared by the village charcoal burner in the nearby woods. It is light, porous, and it burns with an intense, clean heat. You carefully arrange the black, brittle chunks around the small, growing fire, creating a mound. You continue to work the bellows, and the fire responds, its breath growing stronger, its voice a low, hungry roar. The heart of the forge is awake. While the fire builds to its full, white-hot intensity, you prepare for your first task of the day. It is not the forging of a sword or the crafting of a fine piece of armor. It is a task that is far more humble, far more repetitive, and far more essential to the life of the village. It is the making of nails. Every building, every cart, every barrel, every piece of furniture in the village is held together by nails, and they are in constant demand. You take a long, thin, square-profiled iron rod from a bundle in the corner. Iron is precious, imported at great cost, and you waste not a single scrap of it. You thrust the end of the rod deep into the glowing heart of the forge fire. You work the bellows with a faster rhythm now, and the fire roars, its heat an intense physical wave against your face. You watch the tip of the iron rod, your eyes narrowed, judging its temperature by its color.
The iron turns from black to a dull red, then to a bright cherry red, and finally to a brilliant, almost white yellow.
It is ready. In a single fluid motion, you pull the rod from the fire and place its glowing tip on the great dark anvil. The hammering begins. Clang, ... clang. The sound is a sharp, loud, and ringing explosion of noise in the pre-dawn silence. The sound that, for the villagers still in their beds, is the true morning bell. Your movements are a blur of practiced, efficient motion. You use a light, quick hammer. You do not strike the iron with brute force, but with a series of quick, precise, and angled blows. A few blows to create the point, rotating the rod with each strike. Then a few more blows too thin and shape the shank. The entire process takes no more than a few seconds. Then you place the hot rod over a hard-edged tool on the anvil, and with a single sharp blow, you cut the shaped nail from the end of the rod. You are left with a hot, pointed, and headless nail. You immediately insert the hot nail into a hole in a nail header, a thick block of iron with a square hole that matches the size of your nail shank. With two more quick, precise blows of your hammer, you flatten the hot metal, creating the nail's head. You knock the finished nail from the header, and it falls, with a soft metallic tink, into a shallow bucket of water, its heat extinguished in a brief, satisfying hiss of steam. You immediately thrust the end of the iron rod back into the fire, and the entire process begins again. Heat. Hammer the point, cut, head, quench. It is a rhythm, a trance, a kind of percussive, industrial prayer. For the first hour of your day, this is your entire world.
Oh.
You are not a great artist. You are a manufacturer, a human machine, producing the small, essential, and utterly necessary fasteners that hold your entire world together, one simple, identical, and perfect nail at a time. The sun has not yet risen, but in the fiery, ringing heart of the smithy, your day is already well underway. As you work, lost in the simple, repetitive rhythm of making nails, the world outside your forge slowly begins to awaken. The deep, pre-dawn blackness gives way to a soft, gray light, and with it come the familiar sounds of the village stirring to life. You hear the crowing of a rooster, a loud, defiant cry that is answered by another, and then another, a cascading chain of alarms across the small village. You hear the lowing of cattle as they are led from their byres to the common pasture, their hooves making a soft clopping sound on the muddy track that serves as the village's main street. You throw open the great heavy wooden shutters of your smithy, and the cool, clean morning air rushes in, a welcome relief from the growing heat and smoke of the forge. The sound of your hammer, which had seemed so loud in the sleeping silence, now takes its rightful place as the dominant, rhythmic heartbeat of the waking village. Your work is the clock by which many of your neighbors begin their day. The sun is now fully risen, and your first customers begin to arrive. They are not lords or knights. They are your neighbors, the ordinary, hardworking folk whose lives and livelihoods depend on the iron tools you create, and more often the ones you mend. Your first visitor is a farmer named William, his face already ruddy from the morning chill. He carries a heavy, broken cooking pot, a large three-legged iron cauldron. One of its legs is snapped off. It is a small disaster for his family, a costly item that is now useless. He places it before you with a hopeful look. You stop your work on the nails and examine the pot. This is the bulk of your work, not creation, but repair. In a world where iron is a precious and expensive commodity, nothing made of metal is ever simply thrown away. Everything is mended, reforged, and given a new life. You see that the break is clean. It will be a simple but skilled repair that requires a forge weld. You place the heavy pot and its broken leg into the heart of the forge fire, burying them in the glowing charcoal. Work the bellows, bringing the heat up, your eyes fixed on the metal. You are watching for the color, the sign that the iron has reached its welding temperature. It must be heated to a brilliant, almost sparkling white, the point at which the surface of the iron becomes semi-molten, like thick honey. At the precise moment, you pull the two glowing pieces from the fire. You work with a speed and a certainty that is born of 1,000 such repairs. Place the pot on the anvil, and with your free hand, you place the glowing stump of the leg against the body of the pot. You sprinkle a small pinch of a sandy flux onto the joint to help purify the weld. Then, with a lighter, quicker hammer, you begin a series of fast, expert blows. Tap, 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 tap. The sound is different from the heavy clang of forging. It is a light, percussive, and welding sound. With each blow, a shower of brilliant white sparks erupts from the joint. This is the sign of a good weld, the liquid iron and the flux being forced from the joint, leaving only pure fused metal behind. After a few seconds of this rapid hammering, the two separate pieces of iron have become one. The leg is rejoined, the pot is whole again. You quench the repair in the water trough, and a great cloud of steam hisses upwards. The farmer, William, looks at the repaired pot with a deep, grateful relief. He cannot pay you in coin. Silver pennies are scarce and are saved for taxes to the Lord. Instead, he pays you in kind. He promises you a dozen fresh eggs and a measure of flour from his next milling. You nod. It is a good trade. Your work has saved his family a great expense, and his payment will help to feed your own. This is the simple, honest, and deeply interconnected economy of your village. Your next customer is a woodcutter who brings you his two most important tools, a felling axe and a broadadze, their cutting edges blunted and chipped from a season of hard work. This is another of your essential tasks, the sharpening and retempering of tools. This work requires a different kind of skill, a greater subtlety in the control of the fire. You heat the edge of the axe, but you do not bring it to the brilliant white of a welding heat. To do so would be to burn the life, the carbon, out of the steel, making it soft and unable to hold an edge. You heat it only to a gentle cherry red. You then take it to the anvil, and with your hammer, you carefully and precisely reshape the cutting edge, thinning the metal that has been blunted and forging out the small nicks and chips. When the new edge profile is established, you must reharden it. You heat it again, this time to a slightly higher, brighter red, and then you plunge the edge, and only the edge, into the water trough. The hiss is sharp and brief.
Ow.
The edge is now as hard as glass and just as brittle. The final, crucial step is to temper it. You quickly clean and polish the hardened edge with a piece of sandstone, and then you hold it very carefully just above the hot coals of the forge, letting a gentle, residual heat creep back into the steel. You watch the polished surface with an intense focus. As the steel heats, a series of oxide colors like a rainbow will move across its surface. You are waiting for a specific color. For an axe, a tool that needs to be both hard and tough, you are looking for a deep straw yellow or perhaps a light brown. The moment you see that color appear on the edge, you quench the entire axe head one last time, locking the temper in place. The axe is now sharp, hard, and tough. It is, once again, a perfect tool. The forge is now a hot, loud, and busy place. The sun is high in the sky, and a small queue of other villagers is forming at your open door, each one carrying a broken or a blunted piece of their own working lives, waiting for the magic of the fire and the skill of the hammer to make it whole again. The morning progresses in a steady, rhythmic cycle of heating, hammering, and hissing steam. You are the beating heart of the village's working life, and the needs of your community are varied and constant. After the woodcutter leaves with his newly sharpened axe, your next customer arrives, leading a large, placid draft horse. The horse has thrown a shoe, and in a world where a lame horse can mean the difference between a successful harvest and a winter of hunger, the work of the farrier is one of your most essential duties. Shoeing a horse is a craft of two distinct parts: the quiet, careful work with the animal, and the loud, fiery work at the forge. You begin with the animal. You speak to the horse in a low, calming voice as you run your hands down its leg, checking for any injury. You lift the heavy cloven hoof and rest it securely on your leather-aproned thigh. Your first task is to prepare the hoof. If the old worn shoe were still present, you would use a pair of heavy pincers to carefully remove the clenched nails. As it is, you begin by cleaning the hoof using a small curved knife to scrape away the accumulated mud and stones from the sole. Then comes the work of the farrier, which is as much a craft of the stable as it is of the forge. You take your hoof knife and a heavy rasping file, the series of careful practiced movements. You begin to trim the outer wall of the hoof, which has grown long like a fingernail. The work requires a delicate touch and a deep understanding of the animal's anatomy. You are removing the dead, unfeeling horn, but to cut too deep would be to lame the horse, to injure the sensitive tissue of the quick that lies within. The smell is a dry, dusty, and slightly acrid scent of shaved keratin. When the hoof is trimmed, clean, and perfectly level, you are ready for the second phase of the work. You take a measurement of the hoof, and then you turn back to the fire. You select a straight, flat bar of iron, your raw material. You thrust it into the glowing heart of the forge, and with a few powerful pumps of the bellows, you bring it to a bright, malleable, orange-yellow heat. You place the glowing bar on the anvil and the hammering begins. The work is fast and precise. You first use the rounded horn of the anvil to bend the straight bar into a rough U shape. Then, back and forth, from the fire to the anvil, you refine this shape, tapping it here, adjusting it there, until it perfectly matches the size of the horse's hoof. Next, you must create the nail holes. You use a specialized tool, a fuller, to create a groove or crease around the outer edge of the shoe. This will give the nail heads a place to sit securely. Then, with a sharp, pointed punch called a stamper and a few lamed blows of the hammer, you punch the square holes through which the nails will pass. Now comes the most dramatic and sensory part of the process, the hot fitting. You return the finished, but still red-hot, shoe to the horse. For a brief, controlled moment, you press the glowing metal directly onto the flat, trimmed surface of the horse's hoof. The reaction is immediate. A cloud of thick, white, and acrid-smelling smoke billows upwards, the smell of burning hair and horn. The horse does not feel pain, for the outer hoof is nerveless, but it is an unnerving process that requires a calm and confident hand to keep the animal from panicking. The purpose of this is to create a perfect level and slightly charred seat where the shoe will rest, ensuring a flawless fit. You quench the shoe in the water trough. It's the hot iron exploding into a great cloud of steam, and then you are ready for the final step. You place the now cool, blackened shoe onto the hoof. You take your specialized horseshoe nails, which are long and tapered with a wedge-shaped head. One by one, you drive them through the holes in the shoe and into the hoof wall. This is the moment of greatest skill. You must angle each nail with perfect precision so that it passes through the unfeeling outer wall and emerges from the side of the hoof, well away from the sensitive quick within. A single mistake here can cripple the animal. With the nails driven home, you use the claw of your hammer to twist off their protruding ends. Then, with a specialized tool, a clincher, we bend the sharp points over and hammer them down flat against the hoof wall, creating a secure and permanent bond. A final light rasping of the edges to smooth any rough spots, and the work is done. The horse now has its new, strong, and perfectly fitted iron shoe. As you have been working, a small, informal audience has gathered at the great open door of your smithy. The forge is the warmest place in the village, and the constant, rhythmic sound of the hammer is a reassuring, familiar presence. Other villagers waiting for their own tools to be mended, or simply taking a break from their own labors, stand and watch you work, exchanging gossip, discussing the weather, the state of the crops. Your forge is not just a workshop, it is a social center, a place of news and community. The morning's great burst of activity is now drawing to a close. The nails have been made, the pot has been mended, the axe has been sharpened, and the horse has been shod. The first embers of the dawn have grown into the roaring, productive fire of the midday. The sun is now high in the sky, marking the midpoint of the long working day. The morning's flurry of small, quick tasks is over. The pile of fresh black nails is a testament to your early start, and the repaired pots and sharpened axes are already back at work in the village. Now, as the day reaches its peak heat, the more substantial and challenging jobs arrive at your door. But first, you must eat. Your wife brings your midday meal to the forge. It is not a grand meal, but it is the hearty, honest fuel a blacksmith needs. There is a thick slab of dark, heavy rye bread, a generous wedge of sharp, crumbly cheese, and a whole raw onion, which you eat like an apple. Its pungent, fiery taste, a sharp and welcome contrast to the blandness of the bread. You wash it all down with a horn of small ale, a weak alcohol beer that is safer to drink than the river water, and which serves to quench your immense thirst. You do not stop for long. You eat quickly, sitting on the worn, smooth surface of a great tree stump near the door, your back to the still roaring heat of the forge. Rest is a luxury your trade does not often afford. Your afternoon's work arrives in the back of a farmer's cart, pulled by a tired-looking ox. It is the single most important iron tool in the entire village, and it is broken. It is a plowshare. The farmer, a man named Godfrey who works the fields of the local lord, unloads it with a grunt. It is the heavy iron tip of the plow, the part that does the hard, brutal work of cutting through the dense, rocky soil. You can see that the point has been worn down to a blunt nub, and a great jagged crack runs through its body. For the farmer, this is a catastrophe. A broken plowshare means fields cannot be tilled, and if it cannot be mended, a new one must be ordered at a tremendous cost. His entire harvest and the well-being of his family depends on your skill. You examine the broken share. The iron is worn thin and brittle. A simple forge weld will not be enough. The cutting edge needs new life, new hardness. You must not only mend the break, but you must also steel the edge. Complex and highly skilled process of welding a piece of harder, more valuable steel onto the softer iron body. You begin with the steel. You have a small, precious supply of it, imported from Spain or Germany, which you use only for the most important jobs. You take a small, thin bar of this steel and place it in the fire. While it heats, you prepare the broken plowshare, hammering the cracked edges clean and shaping them for the coming weld. The true artistry of the smith is now on display. Must heat two different metals, the large, thick iron of the plowshare and the small, thin bar of steel, to a perfect welding temperature at the same time. They heat at different rates and require a different intensity of air from the bellows. You work with a quiet, intense focus, constantly moving the two pieces in and out of the hottest part of the fire, your eyes fixed on their color. You are waiting for that brilliant, sparkling, almost liquid white heat, the moment the surface of the metal begins to sweat. When the moment is perfect, you move with a speed that belies the days-long labor. In a single fluid motion, you pull both pieces from the fire. You place the great heavy plowshare on the anvil. You place the smaller glowing bar of steel along its cutting edge. You sprinkle the join with a pinch of sand, the flux that will help the metals fuse. And then the hammer falls. You are joined now by your apprentice, a strong young lad who wields the great sledgehammer. Use a smaller hammer, your blows light and rapid, directing him where to strike. Tap dash clang, dot 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 tap dash clang, dot dot tap dash clang, dot dot dot. The rhythm is fast and precise. The shower of brilliant white sparks that explodes from between the two metals is the sign of a perfect weld. With each blow, the two different metals are being forced to become one. The hard soul of the steel being permanently fused to the tough, resilient body of the iron. The weld is complete, but the work is not. The share is now a single solid piece again, but it is a rough, misshapen lump of hot metal. It must be given its form. For the next hour, you and your apprentice work in a powerful, rhythmic unison. You reheat the share and you hammer it, drawing out the new, steeled edge to a fine, sharp point. and carefully reforging the gentle, curving wings that are designed to lift and turn the soil. It is a kind of violent percussive sculpture, shaping the hot, pliable metal with a knowledge that is in your hands and in your muscles, not in your head. Finally, the shape is perfect, but the tool is still not ready. The new steel edge is currently soft, annealed from the heat of the forge. You perform the same careful ritual of hardening and tempering that you did for the axe in the morning. You heat the edge to a precise cherry red and quench it in the water trough, the sudden violent cooling making the steel as hard as glass. Then you gently reheat the spine, your eyes watching the colors run across the polished surface of the metal, and you quench it again as it reaches a deep bronze yellow, the perfect temper for a tool that must endure the shock of striking a hidden rock. You hold the finished plowshare up. It is a heavy, brutal, and yet strangely beautiful object. Its new edge is sharp and hard. Its body is strong and tough. It is, once again, a perfect tool, ready for another season of its long war against the earth. You have not just mended a piece of metal, you have helped to ensure that the village will eat. The farmer, Godfrey, leaves with his repaired plowshare, his face a mask of profound relief, a heavy burden lifted from his shoulders. You take a long drink of water from a wooden bucket, the cool liquid hissing on the hot, dry dust of your throat. The heat in the small, enclosed space of the smithy is now almost unbearable. The great roaring fire which you have been feeding all day has turned the forge into a furnace, and the afternoon sun, low in the sky, now streams through the western opening, adding its own heat to the mix. There is no rest. Your next customer has been waiting patiently, a man whose craft is as essential to the village as your own, the carpenter. He is building a new, small, wooden bridge over the stream at the edge of the village, and he needs the iron that will hold it all together. He needs straps and bolts. This is a different kind of work from the delicate, skilled repair of the plowshare. This is the work of brute force and simple, powerful geometry. You take a thick, heavy bar of raw iron, a bar that weighs nearly as much as a small boy. You and your apprentice work together to heat its entire length in the long, hot trench of the forge. When it is at a bright, malleable orange yellow, you haul it to the anvil. Now, the great 10-pound sledgehammer, the one you use for the heaviest work, comes into play. Your apprentice takes the sledge, and you hold the glowing bar of iron on the anvil with a long-handled pair of tongs, using a smaller, pointing hammer to indicate exactly where the blow should fall. T-A-P clang. T-A-P clang. T-A-P clang. The rhythm is slower now, more powerful, more deliberate than the quick, light work of making nails. The sound is a deep, deafening, and bone-jarring concussion of metal on metal that can be heard all across the village. With each blow of the sledgehammer, the thick bar of iron gives way, spreading, thinning, elongating, under the relentless percussive assault. You work in a shower of brilliant orange sparks, your bodies moving in a practiced, powerful, and dangerous dance. Slowly, the thick bar is transformed into a long, flat strap of iron, of the precise width and thickness that the carpenter requires. While it is still hot, you must bend it. You place the center of the strap over the sharp square edge of the anvil's heel, and with a few skillful blows, you create a perfect, clean, 90-degree angle. Now, the strap needs holes for the bolts that will secure it to the great oak beams of the bridge. You reheat the ends of the strap to a near welding heat. You place it on the anvil and you take up a heavy, square-headed punch. You position the sharp end of the punch over the spot where the hole must be, and you give a signal to your apprentice. He brings the sledgehammer down in a single mighty blow. Thwack! The sound is a dull, forceful thud, and the punch drives halfway through the glowing, soft metal, sending a spray of molten iron sparks into the air. A second blow drives the punch all the way through, and a small square plug of white-hot iron. The clot is driven out the other side, falling to the floor with a sizzle. You have created a perfect, clean, square hole. The process is repeated 3 more times. The iron strap is complete. Next, you must forge the bolts themselves. This is a classic and satisfying piece of smithcraft. You take a long, round rod of iron, you heat one end to a brilliant yellow, and then do the opposite of drawing the metal out. You must upset it to gather a mass of metal for the bolt's head. You quickly place the hot end of the rod on the anvil, and you hammer, not on the side, but directly on the top, a series of powerful vertical blows that cause the hot, soft metal to mushroom, to swell into a thick, club-like shape. You then drop the hot rod into a square hole on the face of your anvil, the hardy hole. The thickened, mushroomed end is now resting on the anvil's surface. With a few final, well-aimed blows of your hammer, you flatten and shape this mass of metal into a perfect, strong, square bolt head. The finished bolt is cut from the rod. The end is given a rough point, and it is thrown into a bucket to cool. You must make a dozen of these, and your movements are a blur of practiced, repetitive efficiency. As you are finishing the last of the bolts, a woman from the village arrives with a different, more domestic problem. The tripod, the iron trivet that holds her cooking pot over the fire in her cottage, has broken. One of its 3 legs has come away. You set aside the heavy, structural work and turn to this smaller but no less important task. You heat the broken leg and the point on the tripod's ring where it once was. With another quick forge weld, you rejoin the 2 pieces. You then check the tripod on the flat earthen floor of your smithy, ensuring that all 3 of its legs are perfectly even, that it does not rock or wobble. Wobbly tripod means a spilled dinner, a small but significant tragedy in a world where every meal is precious. The afternoon light is beginning to fade. The forge is littered with the finished products of your long day's labor. There is the repaired plowshare waiting for the farmer to collect it. There is the neat pile of heavy black iron straps and bolts for the new bridge. There is the mended cooking tripod, ready to return to its place at the heart of a family's hearth. You look at these objects and you see the story of your day, the story of your life. You are the man who mends the world. You are the indispensable center of your village's universe. The craftsman who provides the iron strength that allows the farmers to till their fields, the carpenters to build their structures, and the families to cook their meals. The rhythm of your hammer is the rhythm of survival. As the shadows lengthen in your smithy, and the warm golden light of the late afternoon replaces the harsh glare of midday, you take on your final commission of the day. It is a smaller, more intricate task, a welcome change from the heavy, brutal work of forging the plowshare and the bridge irons. A young woman, soon to be married, has come to collect a set of hinges and a latch for the new wooden chest that will hold her dowry. This is the work that allows for a small measure of artistry, a touch of grace, and a craft that is so often defined by brute force. You take a thin, flat bar of iron and heat it to a bright, malleable orange. For the hinges, you draw out the ends, flattening and shaping them into a graceful, leaf-like pattern. You then use a fine, sharp punch to create the decorative holes for the nails, arranging them in a simple, pleasing pattern. The most skillful part is forging the knuckle, the interlocking loops that will form the joint of the hinge. With a series of precise taps with a light hammer, you curl the hot, soft metal around a small, round mandrel, creating a perfect, tight, and seamless loop. For the latch, you forge a simple handle, but you allow yourself a small flourish. You heat the very end of the handle to a yellow heat, and with a few quick, expert twists of your tongs and taps of your hammer, you shape it into the simple, elegant, and timeless form of a ram's head curl. It is a small detail, one that is not strictly necessary for the latch to function. But it is a mark of your craft, a quiet signature of pride in your work. You quench the finished pieces in the water trough, and the dark blackened iron has been transformed from a simple, functional material into an object of rustic, simple beauty. The young woman's face lights up as she sees them. The price is a small, but very welcome pot of honey. The last of your customers for the day has now departed. The village has been mended. The great roaring pulse of your forge, which has been the heartbeat of the community since sunrise, begins to quiet down. But your work is not yet finished. The physical toll of the long day is now making itself felt. Your back is a single solid ache from the hours spent bent over the anvil. Your hammer arm, your right arm, feels heavy as lead, the muscles trembling with a deep, profound fatigue. The joints of your elbow and your shoulder throb with a familiar, grinding pain, a pain that you know will only grow worse with the years. Your ears are ringing, a constant high-pitched tone that is the ghost of 1,000 hammer blows, a sound that will never truly leave you, even in the dead of night. Your face is caked with a black mask of sweat and soot, and your eyes are red and sore from the heat and the smoke of the fire. But there are still the final, quiet, and essential tasks of closing the forge. Nothing is wasted in your world. You take your rake and you sift through the charcoal and the ash on the floor around your anvil. You're gathering up all the small snipped off ends of iron, all the shavings from your filing, all the clots of metal from the punching of the bolt holes. These scraps are swept together into a pile. This is your faggot, a bundle of waste that will be reborn. You heat the forge one last time, working the bellows to bring it to a brilliant white welding heat. You place these scraps into the fire, and as they begin to glow and soften, you use your tongs to press and squeeze them together, adding your sandy flux to help them fuse. Slowly under the heat and the pressure, the disparate, useless pieces of scrap metal begin to cohere, to melt, to merge. You pull the single glowing and dripping mass from the fire, and with a series of quick, consolidating hammer blows, you forge it into a single, new, and usable bar of iron. It is a rough, ugly-looking bar, its surface a patchwork of different textures, but it is solid, and it can be used tomorrow to make nails, or a simple bracket. It is the final act of your craft, an act of thrift and of transformation, ensuring that the day ends with no waste and with a new beginning already prepared for the morrow. Finally, you begin the process of putting the great fire to sleep. You no longer feed it with fresh charcoal. You bank the remaining hot coals, covering them with a thick, heavy blanket of ash. This will not extinguish the fire completely. It will starve it of air, allowing the embers at the very heart of the forge to smolder, to keep a deep residual warmth throughout the night, so that your work of waking the forge tomorrow will be a little easier. You clean your tools, wiping the soot from your hammers, quenching the last of your hot tongs, and you arrange them in their proper place on the great wooden rack on the wall. The rhythm of your hammer, the great defining sound of the village, has ceased. A deep and welcome quiet settles over the smithy, a quiet that is broken only by the soft, settling crackle of the banked fire. The long and brutally demanding day is over. The next morning begins with the same familiar, comforting ritual. You, Owen, wake the fire, your movements a slow and practiced dance in the pre-dawn gloom. You begin the day with the simple, honest, and repetitive work of making a few dozen nails. Your hammers ringing call the alarm clock for the sleeping village, but you know that today will be different. Today is not a day for mending pots and shoeing horses. Today is a day for the master's art. An order has come from the manor of the local lord. Knight, a man of some importance, will be passing through the village, and he requires a new dagger, a fine, well-made rondel dagger, a weapon of both utility and status. For this work, he has sent a payment in advance, a small but heavy pouch of silver coins. This is a rare and welcome commission. It is an opportunity to practice the higher and more secret mysteries of your craft. The art of working not just with common iron, but with the precious, difficult, and almost magical material that is steel. You retrieve your raw material from a heavy locked chest in the back of your smithy. It is a small, neat bar of high-carbon steel, imported at great expense from the Rhineland, is worth more than its weight in silver. While the soft common iron you use every day is good for making things that are strong and tough, it cannot hold a sharp edge. Steel can. Through the magic of fire and water, it can be made as hard as glass, capable of holding an edge of razor-like keenness. To be a true master smith is to be a master of steel. Your first task is to give the blade its basic form. You do not work with the same furious energy you used on the heavy iron. The work is now quieter, it's more precise, more like the work of a sculptor than a laborer. You heat the end of the steel bar in the forge, your control of the bellows now infinitely more subtle, maintaining a perfect, even cherry-red heat. With a light, precise hammer, you begin to shape the blade. You draw out the point, a sharp, triangular tip designed for piercing mail. You forge the tang, the long, thin tail of the blade that will eventually be seated inside the hilt. And you carefully hammer in the bevels, the long, tapering planes that will form the cutting edges. The work is slow and methodical. You are constantly reheating the metal, making a few precise strikes, and then returning it to the fire. You are not forcing the steel into shape. You are coaxing it, persuading it. When the rough shape of the blade is complete, you begin a new and patient process. You must refine the grain of the steel to relieve the stresses of the hammer and to prepare it for the violence of the quench. You perform this by normalizing the blade. You heat the entire blade to an even dull red, and then you take it from the fire and simply let it cool slowly in the still air of the forge. You do this 3 times. It is a quiet, meditative process, a way of allowing the steel to rest, to settle, to find its own inner balance. After the final normalization, you perform an even slower process, annealing. You heat the blade one last time, and then you bury it deep in the cold ash and charcoal at the side of your forge. Here it will cool with an agonizing slowness over the course of many hours. This process will make the steel as soft as it can possibly be, making the final shaping with files and stones much easier. With the blade now soft and stable, you take it from the forge and to your workbench. With your finest files, You refine the shape, perfecting the clean. Sharp lines of the blade, filing the edge to a near-perfect sharpness. Now, the blade is a perfect shape, but it is a soft shape. It could not hold an edge in a fight. Now comes the moment of magic, the heart of the fire, the secret of the steel. It is time for the hardening, the quench. This is the most dangerous and nerve-wracking moment in the entire life of the blade. 100 things can go wrong. Mistake of a few degrees in temperature, a moment's hesitation, and the blade can warp, it can bend, it can even crack in the water, shattering months of your own work in a single heartbreaking instant. You wait until the sun has set. This work must be done in the dim twilight of the forge, where the only light is the light of the fire itself, so that you can read the true color of the steel without the deceiving glare of the sun. You build up your fire with fresh charcoal, working the bellows until it is a deep and perfect bed of glowing uniform heat. You take the dagger blade in your tongs, say a quiet, private prayer to Saint Clement, the patron saint of blacksmiths, and you pass the blade into the flames. You move it back and forth, slowly, evenly, ensuring that the heat is perfectly distributed, and you watch the color. It is the only guide you have, as the steel begins to glow, a faint dull red. It brightens to a cherry red, the color you used for forging, but you go further. Color brightens to a vibrant, sun-like orange and then to a soft, almost ethereal yellow. You are waiting for the moment the color is as even and as perfect as the setting sun. The moment arrives, the swiftness and a certainty that leaves no room for doubt. You pull the glowing blade from the fire. You take a single step to the great wooden water trough, the slack tub that sits beside your forge, and in one smooth, decisive motion, you plunge the blade, point first, into the cold, dark water. The reaction is explosive. A violent, screaming hiss erupts from the trough as the cold water is instantly turned to steam. A great white cloud billows up, filling the entire smithy with a thick, wet fog. In that violent quarter second, a profound transformation has occurred in the steel. The extreme heat, followed by the extreme cold, has rearranged its very soul, its crystalline structure, into a new form that is incredibly hard. You hold the blade under the water until the hissing stops, until the steel is cool. You then lift it out. It is now a dark, ugly, scale-covered thing. But you know what has happened inside? You take an old file, and you run it along the edge of the blade. The file, which is itself made of hardened steel, does not bite. It skates off the edge with a high, glassy, ringing sound, as if it were sliding on a piece of gemstone. The hardening was a success. You inspect the blade minutely, turning it over in the dim light, looking for the telltale hairline fracture of a failed quench. You see none. The blade has survived. It now has its hard, keen, and deadly spirit. You hold the newly hardened dagger blade in your tongs, and has survived the violent shock of the quench, a trial by fire and water that has left it fundamentally changed. It is now a thing of incredible, almost supernatural hardness. But this hardness is a fragile and dangerous quality. Steel in its current state is as brittle as glass. A sharp blow against another piece of metal, or even a fall onto the stone floor, could cause it to shatter into a dozen useless pieces. A blade that is too hard is just as useless as a blade that is too soft. The secret of steel lies not in its hardness, but in its balance. And so, the next stage of the craft begins, the tempering. This is a gentle, subtle, and equally skillful process, an art of giving back, of coaxing a measure of flexibility and toughness into the hard, stressed, and brittle steel. Your first step is to clean a section of the blade. The quenches left it covered in a dark black scale. You take the blade to your workbench and with a piece of rough sandstone and some water, you begin to polish a wide strip along the length of the blade from the hilt to the tip. You work until the dark scale is gone and the raw, clean silver gray of the steel is revealed, a bright blank canvas upon which you can read the language of the heat. You then return to the forge. Do not place the blade back into the heart of the fire. That would be far too hot and would ruin the hardness you have just created. Instead, you use the residual heat of the forge. You might lay a thick, flat bar of iron over the glowing coals until it is heated to a dull, even red. This bar will be your heat source, a gentle and easily controlled stove. You place the dagger blade, with its polished side facing up, upon this hot bar. And now you watch. This is a process that requires your complete and undivided attention. As the gentle heat begins to creep into the steel, a thin film of oxide begins to form on the polished surface. And this oxide film creates a beautiful, predictable, and incredibly useful spectrum of colors. You watch as the polished steel begins to change. First, it turns a very faint, pale, straw yellow. As the heat increases, this yellow deepens, becoming the color of rich, golden straw. Then, the color continues to shift, moving into a brownish gold, then a purplish brown, and finally into a deep, vibrant peacock blue, before fading back to a dark gray. Each of these colors represents a precise temperature. Each color represents a specific degree to which the steel's internal, crystalline structure is being relaxed, a specific trade-off between hardness and toughness. This is the secret knowledge of the smith. You know that the deep blue color, while beautiful, signifies a steel that has been softened too much, perfect for a spring but useless for a blade. You know that the pale straw yellow represents the greatest hardness, ideal for a razor. For this dagger, a tool that must be both razor sharp and strong enough to withstand a powerful thrust, you are looking for a specific point in the spectrum. You are waiting for the moment the color reaches a deep, golden yellow, almost a brownish gold. You watch your face inches from the heating steel, your eyes narrowed, ignoring the heat that radiates onto your skin. The colors flow across the steel like a slow, silent sunrise. The pale yellow appears, then the deeper gold. Then, just as the first hint of a brownish hue begins to appear at the thickest part of the blade, you act. With your tongs, you snatch the blade from the hot iron and plunge it, one last time, into the water trough. The hiss is brief and quiet. The tempering process is over. The color is locked in. You have captured the steel at its moment of perfect balance. It is still incredibly hard, hard enough to hold a razor's edge, but the brittleness has been replaced by a deep, resilient toughness. The soul of the blade is now complete. Now, you must reveal its final form. You take the blade to the great circular grindstone that stands in the corner of your smithy. It is a massive, heavy wheel of sandstone mounted in a wooden frame over a trough of water. Your apprentice begins to turn the heavy iron crank, and the great wheel begins to spin with a low, rumbling sound, its surface constantly wet from the water in the trough. You kneel before the spinning wheel, and you take the dagger blade in both hands. With a touch that is both firm and incredibly delicate, you begin to grind the final sharp edge onto the blade. This is dangerous work. The spinning stone can easily catch the blade and rip it from your hands, or send a shower of sparks and steel fragments into your eyes. You work with an intense concentration, moving the blade back and forth across the surface of the stone. Maintaining a perfect, consistent angle, the sound a loud, wet, and abrasive SHH, HHHHH. After the grindstone has established the sharp, clean bevels of the edge, the final work begins. It is the work of polishing. You use a series of handheld stones, of progressively finer and finer grits, and a slurry of water and stone dust. You sit for hours, patiently rubbing the surface of the blade, removing the coarse scratches left by the grindstone, replacing them with finer and finer scratches, until the surface of the steel is a smooth uniform and beautiful satin gray. You now hold in your hands a finished blade. It is a simple, elegant, and deadly object. It is perfectly shaped, perfectly balanced, perfectly hardened, and perfectly tempered. It is a testament to your mastery over the four elements of your craft: the earth of the iron, the air of the bellows, the fire of the forge, and the water of the quench. The secret of the steel has been revealed and perfected. You now hold a finished dagger blade. It is a thing of simple, deadly beauty, its perfectly polished surfaces gleaming in the dim, smoky light of the forge, its razor-sharp edge a promise of its ultimate purpose. But a blade without a hilt is a soul without a body. Your final task in this special commission is to dress the blade, to give it the handle, the guard, and the pommel that will make it a complete and balanced weapon. This is a work that showcases the full range of your craft, a craft that is not just about the brute force of the forge, but also about the fine, precise work of a fitter, a joiner, and a woodworker. You begin with the crossguard. You take a simple, short bar of good, soft iron. You heat its center to a bright, malleable orange and place it on the anvil. You are not trying to shape it yet. You're preparing to punch a hole through its very heart. With a small, sharp punch, you mark the center. Then, with a series of careful hammer blows, you begin to drive the punch into the hot metal, creating a small initial indentation. This hole must be the exact size and shape of the base of the blade, the temps. You use a specialized tool, a slender tapered drift, which you drive through the hole with the sledgehammer. The process is slow and requires a great deal of precision. You must constantly reheat the metal, drive the drift a little further, and ensure the hole is stretching evenly without splitting the bar. Finally, the drift passes all the way through, leaving behind a perfect rectangular slot. Now you can shape the guard itself. You heat the ends of the bar, and with your lighter hammer, you draw them out into an elegant, tapering shape, perhaps adding a simple, decorative curl at each tip. You file the surfaces smooth, and then with a final heating, carefully slide the finished guard over the long tang of the blade until it sits perfectly, snugly against the blade's shoulders. Next is the handle. You go to a collection of seasoned, dry wood you keep in a corner of your smithy. You select a piece of dark, hard oak. This is not the work of the fire, but of the knife and the rasp. You carefully split the wood in two, and then, with a small, sharp knife, you begin to carve out a channel in each half, a perfect negative impression of the flat, tapered tang. The work is slow and meticulous. You must constantly check the fit, shaving away the thinnest of curls of wood until the two halves of the handle can be fitted around the Thames with no gaps, no movement whatsoever. Once you are satisfied, you shape the exterior of the handle, rounding its edges, making it a comfortable and secure fit for a human hand. Finally, you must forge the pommel. For a rondel dagger, this is a heavy wheel-like disc of iron that will serve as a counterweight to the blade and protect the user's hand. You forge this from a thick piece of iron, upsetting the metal to create a solid, heavy disc, and then, as you did with the guard, you punch a rectangular hole through its center. You are now ready for the final assembly. The process that will bring all these disparate parts, the steel blade, the iron guard and pommel, the oak handle into a single unbreakable whole. You slide the two carved halves of the wooden handle over the tang. You then fit the heavy iron pommel onto the end. The very tip of the tang now protrudes, just slightly, through the hole in the pommel. This final step is the most crucial of all. You cannot use a nail, a pin, or glue. The entire weapon must be held together by the strength of the steel itself. This is the process of peening. You carefully, with a pair of specialized tongs, heat just the very tip of the Thames, the small piece of metal sticking out of the pommel, until it glows a dull red. The heat must be localized. You cannot allow it to travel down the temps and ruin the temper of the blade itself. Then, with a light ball-peened hammer, you begin a series of quick, precise, and gentle taps on the hot, soft tip of the tang. Tap dash tap dash tap dash tap. You are not striking it with force. You are riveting it, spreading the soft, hot metal of the temps over the cooler, hard iron of the pommel, forming a small, rounded, and permanent head. As the peened metal cools, it shrinks, and this shrinkage exerts an immense, powerful force, pulling the pommel, the wooden handle, and the crossguard into an incredibly tight, solid, and completely immovable unit. The dagger is complete. You hold it in your hand. It feels alive, perfectly balanced. The weight of the pommel is a perfect counterpoint to the weight of the blade. The carved oak handle fits your grip as if it were made for you. It is a fusion of different materials, of different crafts, all brought together by your skill. It is a thing of simple, functional, and deadly beauty. You have spent the entire day on this single object. It is the finest work you are capable of, a testament to your mastery of the heart of the fire and to the deep and secret knowledge of the nature of steel. You wrap the finished dagger in a fine, oiled cloth, ready for the night to collect in the morning. Your great work is done. You wrap the finished dagger in its oiled cloth and place it carefully in a wooden box, ready for the Lord's reeve to collect in the morning. The completion of this masterwork marks the true end of your day's labor. The sun is now a great orange disk, sinking low in the sky, its last long rays of light slanting through the wide open door of your smithy, illuminating the swirling dust and smoke in the air like a golden haze. The frantic, demanding rhythm of the day is over. The queue of villagers with their broken tools and lame horses has long since disappeared. A deep and welcome weariness has settled into your bones, a familiar, heavy ache that is the blacksmith's constant companion. It is time to put the forge to bed. This, too, is a ritual, a quiet and essential part of your day. You take your long-handled iron rake and you begin to tend to the fire. You no longer feed it with fresh charcoal. Instead, you gently stoke the great glowing bed of embers, pushing all the hottest, most vibrant coals into a tight, compact mound in the very center of the hearth. This is the heart of the fire, the living core that you must preserve through the night. You then take your shovel and cover this glowing mound with a thick, heavy blanket of the cooler ash and fine charcoal dust from the edges of the forge. You are not extinguishing the fire. You're insulating it, starving it of the air it needs to burn, and forcing it into a long, slow, hibernating smolder. A faint, pulsing red glow, visible only in the deepening gloom of the smithy, shows that the heart is still alive, waiting for your bellows to awaken it again in the morning. With the fire now banked and quiet, a new kind of peace descends upon the workshop. The intense, oppressive heat begins to dissipate, replaced by a gentle, radiant warmth. The silence, no longer broken by the deafening clang of the hammer, feels profound. All that is left is the soft, whispering crackle of the cooling embers. Your final task is to care for your tools. You wipe the black soot from the faces of your hammers and you run an oily rag over their heads to prevent the damp night air from bringing the rust. You gather your chisels and your punches, and you place them back in their proper order on the great wooden rack on the wall. You sweep the stone floor around the anvil, gathering the flakes of fire scale and the small sheared-off scraps of iron. Every tool is a trusted servant, a partner in your craft, and you treat them with a quiet, practical respect. It is in this calm, quiet twilight hour that your forge undergoes its final transformation of the day. It ceases to be a workshop, and it becomes a social center, the warm and unofficial heart of the village. As the other men of the village finish their own day's labor, they begin to drift towards your open door. First comes Godfrey, the farmer whose plowshare you repaired. He comes not as a customer, but as a neighbor, leaning his weary frame against the doorpost. He is followed by the woodcutter, and then by the village miller, his own clothes covered in a fine, white dust. A stark contrast to your own black soot. They are drawn here for a simple reason, for the warmth. Your forge is the warmest place in the village, and it's gentle. Radiant heat is a welcome comfort for bodies that are tired and chilled from a long day in the fields. They're also drawn by the news. You, the blacksmith, are a central hub in the village's web of information. You see everyone. You speak to everyone. You know whose cow has fallen sick, whose roof is leaking, who is preparing for a wedding, and who is quarreling with whom. The men gather in the gentle warmth, their voices low in the gathering dark, and they exchange the news of the day. They speak of the price of grain, of the health of the Lord's new heir, a strange merchant who passed through the village that morning. You do not speak much. You're a man of the hammer, not of words. You listen mostly, occasionally offering a quiet grunt of agreement or a short practical observation. Your status in this small community is a curious one. You're a simple craftsman, a man who works with his hands covered in dirt and sweat. But your skill, your mastery of the almost magical art of fire and iron, gives you a unique and profound respect. You are the man who can mend the broken, the man who can create the tools that make all other work possible. You are indispensable. And so, when you do speak, the other men listen. The last visitor of the evening is the village priest, his dark robes a stark shadow in the firelight. He, too, has come for the warmth and for the company. He brings news from the wider world, news he has heard from a traveling friar, the wars in France, of the doings of the Pope in distant Rome. For an hour, you and these men, the pillars of your small, medieval world, the farmer who feeds it, the miller who grinds its grain, the priest who tends its soul, stand together in the quiet, fading warmth of the forge. It is a simple, unspoken, and deeply important ritual, a quiet affirmation of the bonds of community that hold your world together. Finally, as the last of the light fades from the sky and the stars begin to appear, the men take their leave. their quiet good nights echoing in the now darkened smithy. You are alone once more. The social heart of the forge has ceased its beating for the night. All that is left is the faint pulsing glow of the embers, a single red sleeping eye in the darkness. You stand for a moment in the deep, quiet darkness of your smithy, the only light the faint, pulsing red glow from the heart of the banked fire. The day is done. With a final weary grunt of effort, you pull the great heavy wooden shutters closed, plunging the workshop into a near-total blackness. You slide the thick oak bar into place, securing your world of iron and fire for the night. You turn your back on the forge and pass through the small, connecting door into your home. The transition is a journey between two worlds. You leave behind the world of charcoal, of iron, of the sharp metallic tang of your trade. You step into a world that smells of wood smoke from the central hearth, of a savory pottage simmering in a pot over the fire, and of the faint sweet scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The single room of your cottage is a small, warm, and welcoming space lit by the gentle, dancing glow of the hearth fire. Your wife Ellen is there, her movements slow and tired as she stirs the evening meal. She has tended to your small garden, milked the single-family cow, baked the day's bread in the clay oven outside, and spent the evening hours spinning wool into thread with her simple drop spindle. Her world is as essential to your family's survival as your own. Your children are there. Your son, a boy of 12, who has spent the day as your apprentice in the forge, is now quietly carving a piece of wood by the fire. His face and hands are almost as black with soot as your own. Your young daughter is asleep on a pile of furs in the corner, her face soft and peaceful in the firelight. This is the other half of your life, the quiet, domestic anchor to the loud, public, and fiery world of your work. You go to the wooden bucket of water by the door and with a coarse lye soap. You begin the long and difficult process of scrubbing the day's grime from your hands, your arms, and your face. The soot has worked deep into the lines of your skin, a permanent tattoo of your trade, and you know you will never be truly clean. But the feeling of the cool water is a blessing, washing away the heat and the sweat of the forge. The family gathers for the evening meal. You do not sit at a high table on benches. You sit on low, simple stools around the central hearth. The meal is served in wooden bowls. It is a thick, nourishing pottage, a stew made from the peas, leeks, and onions from your garden. It's thickened with barley and flavored with a small, precious piece of salted bacon. You eat it with thick slices of the dark, heavy bread your wife has baked, using the bread to scoop up the stew. There is not much conversation. The day's labor has left little energy for words. The only sounds are the crackling of the fire, the soft bubbling of the pot, and the quiet sounds of a family eating together. It is a moment of simple, profound peace, a quiet communion of shared food and shared exhaustion. After the meal, you sit by the fire. The day is over, but a man's hands are never truly idle. You take a piece of worn leather harness that is broken, and with an awl and a thick waxed thread, you begin the slow, quiet work of mending it. It is a gentle, repetitive task that helps to soothe your mind. Your son shows you the small wooden horse he has been carving. You take it, your great calloused blacksmith's hands surprisingly gentle as you examine the simple toy. You point with your thumb to a rough spot, and you murmur a quiet word of advice on how to use the knife to smooth it. Even here, in the quiet of your home, you are a teacher, a master of your craft, passing on the knowledge of tools and materials. As the fire burns low, your wife takes the sleeping child and lays her in her small straw-filled bed. Your son, his eyes heavy with sleep, curls up in his own blankets. The world has shrunk now from the entire village to just this one single warm and sleeping room. You two are now overcome with a weariness so deep it is a physical weight. You put aside the harness you have been mending. You add one last slow-burning log to the fire, enough to keep a warmth in the room through the night. You lie down on your straw mattress beside your wife. You can hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your children. You can hear the low sigh of the wind outside. And you can feel, in every muscle and in every joint of your body, the deep aching and honest pain of a day of hard and productive labor. Your long day is finally completely over. You lie on your straw mattress, the simple comfort of the rough wool blanket, a welcome relief. The deep, profound weariness that has been building in your body all day finally claims you. It is not the troubled, anxious sleep of a lord or a merchant, their minds filled with politics and profits. It is the deep, heavy, and dreamless sleep of a man who has given every ounce of his physical strength to the day's labor. It is a sleep of pure, necessary, and welcome oblivion. Outside in the smithy, a different kind of quiet reigns. The great roaring voice of the fire is gone. The deafening clang of the hammer is a distant memory. The forge at night is a place of deep shadows and profound silence. The only light is the faint, pulsing, and almost imperceptible red glow from the heart of the banked fire. Single sleeping ember buried in its blanket of ash. It is the only sign of the immense energy that slumbers here, waiting to be reborn with the dawn. The tools hang cold and silent on the walls. The great anvil, which all day was the center of a universe of noise and violent transformation, is now a block of cold, absolute stillness, its surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight that filters through a crack in the shutters. And outside, the sleeping village is held together by the invisible web of your day's work. The nail you forged this morning is now holding a new shingle on a neighbor's roof. The pot you mended is sitting by a cold hearth, its belly full from the evening's meal. The axe you sharpened is leaning against a wall, ready for the morning's work. The shoe you fitted is on the hoof of a horse, sleeping soundly in its stable. Your labor is the unseen iron skeleton that gives the entire community its form and its strength. Without your fire, without your hammer, the world of the village would slowly but surely fall apart. The day you have just lived, with its nails, its pots, its axes, and its horseshoes, is not a special day. It is every day. The work changes in its details, but its rhythm is eternal. It is a cycle of heating, of hammering, of mending, a cycle that is as ancient and as predictable as the turning of the seasons themselves. This repetition is not a prison. It is the source of your skill, the foundation of your life, and the quiet, steady pulse of your world. Your life is a story written in iron. It is a story of transforming the raw, stubborn, and unyielding substance of the earth into the tools of civilization. You are the man who stands between the untamed wildness of the ore and the ordered world of the village. As you sleep, your body begins the slow, quiet work of its own repair, mending the strained muscles, soothing the aching joints, preparing itself for the moment when the first gray light of dawn appears and the great leather bellows must be worked once more. Your long, heavy day of labor is over. Our journey with the medieval blacksmith is now at an end. We have heard the rhythmic clang of the hammer, felt the searing heat of the forge, and witnessed the slow, patient mending of a village. It was a world where a man's strength was measured in the iron he could shape, where the fire was a hungry beast to be tamed, and where the survival of a community depended on the skill of a single essential craftsman. That world of ringing anvils, of glowing iron, and of hissing steam has now faded away, leaving only the quiet of the present moment. The blacksmith's long and heavy day is over, and now so is yours. There is nothing left to do but to rest, to let go of the day, and to drift into the deep and peaceful sleep that you deserve. Rest now. Sleep well.